We're going to solve the equation 4x to the 2/3 power minus 11x to the 1/3 power minus 3 equals 0. And we're going to do this by a method called u substitution. And so this problem tells you to use u equals x to the 1/3 power. Let me explain why they chose to do that. Well, if I do x to the 1/3 power and I square that, then power on the power rule says I take 1/3 times 2. So 1/3 times 2 is x to the 2/3 power. So if I let u equal x to the 1/3 power, then u squared is x to the 2/3 power. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our equation 4x to the 2/3 power minus 11x to the 1/3 power minus 3 equals 0. And by substituting in, it becomes 4u squared minus 11u minus 3 equals 0. So what we're going to do now is we're going to solve this by factoring. So when I solve this by factoring, I use a method called the t-chart method, which means that I take the leading coefficient times the constant. So 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. And I look for factors of negative 12 that add to be negative 11. So I know negative 12 times 1 is negative 12, and I know that negative 12 plus 1 is negative 11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite my problem 4u squared minus 11u minus 3 equals to 0. I'm going to rewrite it to 4u squared minus 12u plus 1u minus 3 equals 0. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these first two together and these last two together. And the first two I'm going to take out a 4u because that's what they have in common. And I get u minus 3. And the last two have nothing in common, and it already matches this parenthesis. So I'm going to take out a positive 1 because that won't change anything. So I put a plus 1 here. So 1u divided by 1 is 1u. Minus 3 divided by 1 is negative 3. So my parentheses match. So that means that my two factors are my parenthesis that matches, which is u minus 3, and my two GCFs, which are 4u plus 1 equals 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my two parentheses, u minus 3 and 4u plus 1, and then rewrite this back with the x to the 1/3 power. So I need to go to another slide here. So remember that I had u minus 3 and 4u plus 1, but u was x to the 1/3 power. So I have really x to the 1/3 power minus 3, and I have 4x to the 1/3 power plus 1. Now I'm going to set each one of these factors equal to 0 and solve. So x to the 1/3 power minus 3 equals 0, and 4x to the 1/3 power plus 1 equals 0. So I'm going to add 3, so x to the 1/3 equals 3. And over here I'm going to subtract 1, so 4x to the 1/3 power minus 1 equals, 4x to the 1/3 power equals negative 1. So here, raising something to the 1/3 power to get rid of that is the same thing as cube rooting. But so to get rid of this is I'm going to cube both sides. So if I take x to the 1/3 power to the 3rd power and 3 to the 3rd power, 1/3 times 3 is x to the 1st, and 3 to the 3rd is 27. So one of my answers is 27. Over here, I still need to divide by 4, so I divide by 4. So I have x to the 1/3 power equals negative 1/4. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to raise this to the 3rd power, and I'm going to raise this to the 3rd power. So this 1/3 times 3 becomes x to the 1st again. Over here, negative 1 to the 3rd power is negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And 4 to the 3rd power, 4 times 4 is 16, 16 times 4 is 64. So my other answer is x equals negative 164. Okay, so this is a very similar problem. So, but this time they do not tell you what the u substitution is. So what I'm going to do is I have x to the 2/3 power. and I need to decide what I want u to be. So again, if I rewrite this as x to the 1/3 power to the second, 1/3 times 2 is 2/3. So that means that I want my u right here to be x to the 1/3 power. So my problem becomes, and if you look right here, this helps you. See how that right there is x to the 1/3 power? So now this problem becomes 8u squared minus 55u minus 7 equals 0. So again, 8 times negative 7 is negative 56. So factors of negative 56 that add to be negative 55. So this it is negative 56 times 1. And negative 56 plus 1 is negative 55. So when I rewrite this, it becomes 8u squared minus 56u plus 1u minus 7. Put these two together, I got an 8u, I get u minus 7. Again, they match, so I take out a 1, I get u minus 7. So my two parentheses are 8u plus 1 and u minus 7. All right, so let's go up top here. I'm going to substitute x to the 1/3 power back in for u. So this becomes 8x to the 1/3 power plus 1 and x to the 1/3 power minus 7. Set these equal to 0 and solve. So 8x to the 1/3 power plus 1 equals 0. And x to the 1/3 power minus 7 equals 0. So on the first one, I'm going to subtract 1. So 8x to the 1/3 power equals negative 1. And divide by 8. So x to the 1/3 power equals negative 1/8. I'm going to cube this side, and I'm going to cube this side. So this becomes x equals negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And then 8 to the 3rd power, 8 times 8 is 64, and 64 times 8 is 512. So one answer is negative 1 over 512. The other answer here, I'm going to add 7, so I have x to the 1/3 power equals 7, and I'm going to cube this side, and I'm going to cube this side. So 7 times 7 is 49. 49 times 7 is 343. So my two answers are x equals negative 1 over 512 and 343.